This is the When Work Isn't Work podcast. This podcast exists to help people reignite the love of what they do in a post-pandemic world. The pandemic gave us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reflect on what is truly important to us in work and in life. I'm your host, Sinead Connolly, co-founder and director of Lotus People, an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency. We hope you enjoy today's chat. My guest today is Laura Hopes. Laura is a serial entrepreneur with multiple businesses under her belt. She is my Lotus People co-founder, a yoga teacher, a consultant, a strategist, a thought leader within the recruitment industry, and also happens to be my best friend. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Laura and I have had 12 years of practice for this, and we easily could have recorded for another 3 hours. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Laura, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the When Work Isn't Work podcast.
Yay.
I'm very happy to have you here. This podcast and the reason behind it, we'll launch straight into that, is to help people reignite the love of what they do in a post-pandemic world. I think, as we all know, COVID gave everyone so much opportunity to reflect on what is important to them, what they want their worlds to look like. And I think talking through and hearing from people like yourself who are super inspiring in loving what they do every day will hopefully allow listeners to feel inspired and engaged and, reignite a bit of energy around whatever it is they're doing day to day. So obviously, we know each other well. Mm-hmm. You have been a source of inspiration for me in so many ways. I literally wouldn't even be in my career in recruitment without you. You are absolutely incredible as a serial entrepreneur. We obviously set up Lotus People together, our co-founders, and you're one of the most intuitive, amazing brains that I have ever come across. So super excited for everyone to be able to hear your journey. To kick us off, can you give us a little bit of an overview of your current role, career, the current state that it's in as of today?
I can. We could just leave it there because I feel like it's a great advertisement for me. I can. So I currently have a business called Hopes Consult, which I've been running for the last 4 years. And that business, what I do, because it's just me, is go into recruitment agencies, run training, development, advisory for recruitment agency owners. And then a couple of years ago, I also launched a public online business, specializing in recruitment again with Ez Khan, who some of you may know. Ez runs a recruitment agency called Spencer Lane. So we also co-founded that business. I've got 15 years agency recruitment experience, so many of those years with you by my side. And I've always just had a huge passion for that industry.
I was going to say recruitment is definitely the thread in all of because you've obviously had so many different businesses and different iterations and different journeys within it, which has been amazing to watch. But recruitment is the core thread and the core focus. With your pathway, no one ever chooses that might be a lie, but from my experience, no one chooses the recruitment career. People do fall into it. So tell us a little bit about how you got into recruitment in the first place and kind of ended up where you ended up now. Yeah,
it's funny, isn't it? Because most of us go, oh yeah, we did fall into it. And I think I might have been one of those people that chose it.
How am I only finding this out?
I don't know. I think because I had zero direction, right? It was like 20 years old, been out of school a couple of years, had deferred a place at university, never ended up going, and just didn't really have any idea of what I wanted to do. And, so I was on job boards or whatever and, started applying for recruitment roles, and I had no idea what it was or what it was about. And I was applying for roles that I had no experience in.
Gotta love the confidence.
Yeah. It was just like, that classic candidate, they come across your desk and you're just like, this person has zero experience in the role that we've advertised. That was me. But I think something about the way it was advertised was something about it being able to help people get jobs. It just instantly resonated with me. And it's funny because my first role in recruitment was an administrative role because that had been what I'd been doing. And I joined this business and I just got it just from day one, everything about it interested me. And so I think that I was actually one of those rare people that was drawn to it as opposed to someone going, hey, you should try this, or ended up falling into it. So yeah, I think I'm one of the recruitment tragics.
You're one of those. And it's funny, isn't it? Because, and this obviously isn't necessarily a recruitment podcast, but I think in figuring out what we are drawn to, it can be so helpful in kind of allowing people to understand what they are drawn to as well. With recruitment, it's a sales role. It's a funny role that kind of spans so many different things, but I know for me personally, the things that interest me within it are the fact that it is so broad and varied, and the mix of psychology and marketing, and it's obviously changed so much over the last few years. So what within your kind of strengths and interests do you think held you within that career and within that sector for so many years?
I think that's such a good question. And I think so. Some context, obviously, for those of you who are listening, a couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And it's really funny looking back on kind of my early career history before I found recruitment. And I just bounced around from job to job, and I got bored very, very easily. And I was in administrative roles, and, I'd spend 6 months somewhere and then I'd be like, I'm ready for the new adventure. And I didn't realize that that is something that young adults with ADHD actually really struggle with, is repetitive tasks or repetitive jobs, or they really thrive on novelty. And so when I ended up in recruitment, it was that, it's that classic phrase of no 2 days are the same, but it really, really is. And I think the breadth of the vastness of the role, and how many different hats you have to wear, and how much you still now, 15 years later, how much I still learn on a day-to-day basis, it just blows my mind. And I think that has been what has kept me so invested in the industry for such a long time, because all that has to happen is the market shifts. And then we have an entirely new job, essentially. And, on one hand, you're in sales and business development. And then on the other hand, you're in project management, and then there's all these administrative tasks along the way. And I think what a career in recruitment essentially gifted me was the ability to run my own business. And I think so many people with ADHD minds, neurodivergent minds really struggle with is repetitive jobs or industries. And so I feel like I landed on my feet, or I fell into actually a career that I didn't realize at that point would be so rewarding for someone of my type of brain.
And there's so much opportunity to have so many mini deadlines within the course of a week, right? Like it is constantly... everything is
you're constantly stressed, isn't it?
The hysteria suits your neurodisposition.
Apparently neurodivergent people are very, very good in a crisis, and recruitment is basically
an everyday crisis being
all
in
day,
a
constant crisis. And so it actually, and I'm calmest when I'm dealing with crisis. Like, I really, that's where I thrive. And I think when you're in a job that is constantly on the verge of being catastrophically stressful, actually that is where I'm in my happiest place.
100%. And I think even with us setting up Lotus People when we were 27, 28 between us. I think the fact that we had temp desks within recruitment, it had given us that exposure to running a business. We already had contractors out. We already had people who we were managing HR issues for. We already had the commercials around it to some extent, although we obviously had a lot to learn. Very naive. But it's such a commercial role, and it's such a good role for people with a business brain. And also people who, and I lose interest as well. There's so much opportunity to just have so much variety in your day to day, which I think is amazing. This suddenly sounds like a advertisement for selling
Do you
recruitment.
Want to come and work in recruitment? We've got a little jingle coming up as well.
Sponsored by. No, that's amazing. And it is good to hear. And I think it's an industry where you see a lot of that. You see a lot of people who get in, they don't know what they want. And my hiring profile, when I look for people who aren't in the industry, is people who are driven, who have a commercial and business sort of mindset or mentality or aptitude, and need a career, but they don't know what that looks like yet. If you come to me with those attributes, I'm like, in you come.
Yeah,
I'm going to make you
and
good.
That was you.
Yep.
Like I remember, because I was already at the company that we were working at when Sinead joined, but it was that desire of like, I'm hungry and I don't know what it's for.
And the fire in the belly.
Yeah. And so many of us reach periods of our career where we feel directionless, and there have been periods since where I've had those feelings. And I think it's that hunger that then drives us onto that next opportunity. And that for me that's why it's always had that thread of recruitment through it, because it's always held my interest.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was going to ask you next around what's held your interest, because you have had different businesses, different versions, different markets, as you said before, like what we were doing during COVID. And I know for Lotus particularly, and for my role during that pandemic, when everyone was out of work, when it was just a completely different market to what it is now, which is chaos, pure chaos. Everyone wants to hire and there's not enough humans, which is the opposite problem. But you still love it, right? You still enjoy it. I'm assuming you still love it. It's the premise of the podcast. So you bloody hope so.
You imagine this is my massive reveal.
I'm actually fed up.
I bloody hate it. I'm so over it. No, I still love it. But I think, sorry, what was your question going to be?
That was it. The what has kept you, other than the variety, what has kept you engaged for so long? In particularly, not I guess in kind of your feeling towards the industry, but more specifically within your role and how you figured out what you do love doing day to day.
I think what I've always needed is for the roles that I've had, whether they be working for someone else or for myself, I've always needed the freedom to evolve. And that's one of my biggest values is choice and freedom. And I think any time that I have struggled is when I feel trapped by a decision and by options. And I think that's why for me, I do work very well on my own. Because I need a level of freedom for things to evolve. And, in the last 4 years of running Hopes Consult, there's been like 4 or 5 iterations of it, and I don't, because I get asked a lot, what do you do in terms of planning? And I have, annual plans in terms of my personal goals, but I keep things with my business very, very fluid because I know I will change my mind. And so I think the industry constantly evolves. So that's kept me interested in the recruitment industry. But in my own career, I need to know that there is freedom to evolve always and that there is choice. And I think with that choice for me, I don't value consistency. So uncertainty actually excites me and motivates me more than kind of knowing my remit. Like I'm at my happiest when I feel out of my comfort zone.
And I think knowing that is so freeing, because you can then build a structure around that enables you to continue to make choices based on your values and based on what you know you absolutely need within a role in order to be living your best life, to have work. So, because obviously work isn't everything, balance is absolutely essential. And so I think having that structure and awareness around it will enable you to keep making choices. I do think it's a privilege over years of kind of self-development and self-growth and kind of working on yourself. It's a privilege to be able to really easily articulate that for people who perhaps don't have an easily accessible answer to that question. Like, what do you need? What do you want out of work? Like, is there anything that you'd suggest or recommend, or any ideas around how, because I do think recruitment is so good at honing our intuition and honing kind of what we're good at and are listening to our gut feeling, and it kind of propels you down this path. And I know this has definitely been our experience. It's propelled you down the path where you kind of know yourself really, really well. And not everyone is at that position. So a few steps back, if you're not quite there, is there anything that you'd
it's such a good question. And I agree. I think so much in our industry is about self-reflection. So you spend a lot of time revisiting, what you've done and what's worked and what hasn't, and tuning into your emotional intelligence and cultivating all of that. And I think, I think for me, because there have been absolutely times where I'm like, I genuinely don't know what I want to do. Even a couple of years ago, I was really in a place where I was like, I don't know what this business looks like, and I'm fed up of what it looks like at the moment, and I don't know what the next iteration is. And I think that one of the best piece of advice, I guess, I could give, or what works for me, is just saying yes. Like I say yes. And I know that that's again, easier said than done, but I say yes to things that I have no idea how to do yet. And I'm just like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And that's what I always try and think in mind. And, you know, that comes from a very privileged place to be able to say that. But, you know, what is the worst thing that will happen in saying yes to this? It might go badly. Okay, cool. Then I've learned that that thing isn't for me. But what if it goes well? Then that is going to open up 5 other doors of opportunity. And so I think it's about starting to put the feelers out there and just going, okay, that, you know, tuning in, like, how does that feel in my gut? How would saying yes to that make me feel? Would that make me feel excited, scared? Is the fear from a not wanting to do it? Or is the fear from a place of like, oh, that scares me, but it interests me? So I think that is a big thing. And I also think, you know, being able to reflect on your patterns as well. Like if I look at my patterns over the last 17 years of my working life, I've never stayed.
That's a long time.
I know. It's as long as
Showing
I was
your age there.
it's as long as the age I was when I left school.
My God.
No, don't.
I can't think about that.
No, it blows my
panicking
mind.
me.
Yeah. But if I think about that, I've never, ever been in a job for longer than 2 years. So if I think about it from that perspective, then that's not for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's looking at your patterns of what do you like doing in your personal life? How can you bring some of those things through? I think it is self-reflection exercises, which are easier said than done. But sometimes you just need to clear the deck and go, what do I like? Like, what do I actually like doing? What are my values? How can I find alignment with that? And just start exploring what that looked like. And it might be things that you just start doing on the side. Like you're like this podcast, right? Scary, doing something new for the first time. And there's always going to be nerves and concerns around it. But it's like, what's the worst thing that can happen with it? You hate running it. And then, you know, or no one's listening to this.
The one listener, thank you.
It's our mums.
Yeah. Or not. They've had enough at this point, for God's sake, the poor things. No, you're completely right. And I think what I really kind of took from that as well is, and from knowing you for so many years, is that you have, as you said, you haven't had a job in inverted commas for more than 2 years, but you're so successful in your own right. And you didn't even touch on the, obviously being a yoga teacher and starting that business and that whole side, the wellness and everything you do around that side of it as well. And so I think people so often, particularly younger people, can so easily think that it has to be a certain way, but so much success can come from really leaning into figuring out what those patterns are and leaning into figuring out what your ways of working. It's the classic entrepreneur personality, right? Like you look at the likes of all the names that are thrown around when you think of ADHD, Richard Branson and all of these big personalities. It's like they don't ever go along with convention. And if that is your path, great, fine. If it isn't, then it doesn't need to be that the other way is the only way.
Yeah. And it used to really bother me. Like it used to really bother me. Like I would be the person that people would be like, oh, you got another new job, you know, another new job. And that would really bother me. And it wasn't until I started beating to the rhythm of my own drum that I really started to find what I liked, because then it was like, well, screw what everyone else does. And like, I'm never going to be able to work, for me, I would never be able to work in a corporate role and having my place within that. It just wasn't my path. And, you know, there have been times in my business where it's been really hard. And I've been like, that feels like that would look a lot easier. But I know that it wouldn't fill up my cup long term. And so I think it is about being able to accept who you are and what you actually like, as opposed to what you think that you should like based on what society tells you should like.
And there's so much noise. There's so much societal noise. There's so much influence from peers and from parents and from whoever the kind of influential figures in your life are. And I think if you can kind of work on cutting that out, whether it is without going woo-woo, whether it is meditation, whether it is mindfulness, whether it is self-development, whether it is therapy, whatever form it comes in, there's a huge amount of value to be placed in working out what your preferences are and what you actually get drawn to. And Erin Evan was on the podcast, and we spoke a lot about flow state. And it's like figuring out when you're in flow state and things are just working. It's like, what is that? Multiply that by 1,000, bottle that. And that's the thing that you do. And you touched on values a few times. And even that, like as a word, it can just be abstract. What are your values? What do you stand for? And people might know what values they have within relationships, within romantic relationships, or what they feel about their family values, but actually figuring out like, what do I stand for? Like, what are my values? That can really enable you to figure out the type of business you want to work in, the type of career you want to have, and kind of allows you to make decisions. And touching on what you said earlier around the hell's yes and kind of saying yes to things, like I love that. And I think even when we set up Lotus together after 18 months or so, we had the conversation and you decided to leave the business. And at the time I was like, oh my God, I can't do this on my own. But there was like the smallest seed. And obviously I was devastated to lose you, but there was the smallest seed in me that was like, this isn't the fear of absolutely no, I can't do this. This is the fear of like the fear. This is the unknown, the out of the comfort zone, and being in tune, being kind of intuitive enough to be able to pick up on that in yourself. And I can still kind of feel and see and hear that now. If someone asks me to do something, whether it's a work opportunity, whether it's something kind of outside of the normal day to day, if it is a hell's yes, it's a hell's yes within seconds, and it's a hell's yes that leads to things, and it's amazing, and I absolutely love it. And if it's should I fit it in? And you're already sort of going, I have hesitations. But again, you have to get to a point where you can trust your intuition and your gut well enough to kind of know. And I don't think a lot of us do, because we do have a lot of noise. And I'm not saying that I'm great at it, but I'm saying that over time I've flexed that muscle.
Yeah, well, you cultivate it,
and you cultivate it.
And I think 100%, I think it comes down to you have to put work into that stuff. Like, you know, we're not naturally, like, we're conditioned to be like caring what other people think, what other people say. This is what society does. We're constantly advertised to. Like, this is the way that your life should look. I'm gesticulating wildly. You guys can't see. So really passionate about this. I just realized. But we get really caught up in what our lives should look like. And I think a lot of us don't actually have a lot of time for self-reflection. And, you know, both of us have done a huge amount of work. And I say that proudly because that work is painful at times.
Icky.
You know, and you wish sometimes you never even start. You're like, why did I even start? Ignorance is bliss.
Take me back there.
When you're unraveling layers of trauma, you start going, oh God, you know, it's nice when you could just cover up a bad day with a glass of wine rather than really having to look into what's triggered you. But I think, you know, when we talk about doing the work, I think it feels like it's this cliche phrase thrown around like it's easy, but it's not. And getting to know yourself is not easy. And until you invest time getting to know yourself, it's very hard to know what you actually like and what your preferences are.
Yeah, completely. This podcast is sponsored by Lotus People Recruitment. We are an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency with a genuine human-first and innovative approach. Lotus People are disrupting the recruitment industry by placing quality and service at the heart of all we do. Recruiting roles across HR, talent, business support, and much more. Head to our website today for more information if you are a job seeker or an employer hiring staff. We're at lotuspeople.com.au. The world of work at the moment and the conversations we're having with candidates and the kind of sentiment and rhetoric from people is that they're ready for a change. And some businesses are so forward thinking when it comes to flexibility and remote working and the future of work, and others aren't. And I guess the reason and the catalyst for even doing this podcast is because we're just sensing a shift. People want more balance and people want more opportunity to kind of have a life as well, which is amazing. So businesses hopefully can keep up. Not all of them are, but they'll get there.
Yeah.
Keep up
but there's a demand.
That shift. There's demand for it. Yeah.
You know, and I think it is changing into a market where candidates can say, hey, this is what I need, like for this to work for me. And companies are going, okay, we actually need to start accommodating this for the classic 9 to 5 or, you know, 8 to 6 realistically doesn't work for a lot of people, but we're conditioned to think it does because that's what everyone does, you know? And I think people are starting to go, well, actually, I do want to pick my kids up from school at 3 and I can log on at 7 p.m. when they've gone to bed. Like there are things that I can do in my life now that don't mean I have to fit the mold. And I think even if, you know, if you're feeling stuck or it's something like that. Like that does come down to like, what's the worst thing that could happen? Just asking, you know, if it's a lifestyle shift that you need, but you love what you do, then those questions can always be asked, because candidates have way more power. Employees have way more power now than they ever have. And I think that's really exciting, because people can start to create the lives that they want within the framework of organizations, as opposed to fitting in to what those organizations say is the status quo.
Completely. And that is what makes me so excited about the next few years. I know personally, with Lotus, we've implemented a Lotus global policy where we can kind of work remotely and work anywhere for some of the year. And my God, am I going to take advantage of that?
You'll be using it more than everyone else. As you should.
4 weeks, was it? I'll be off. But even with that, I spent 3 months in Ireland at the end of last year. We know about each other, how homesick we were living so far away during the pandemic and the borders being closed. And being able to go home and be in Ireland and spend time with family for 3 months and work ridiculous hours, 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. or whatever it was. I got an unbelievable amount of work done, because there was a lot of the day where people were offline. But I have always worked in a career that is client facing, running around the city in heels, running from meeting to meeting. Like, you couldn't ever do meetings remotely or from home. It just wasn't accepted. So that's just been the biggest silver lining from the pandemic and from that whole experience, being able to work remotely and have different experiences and just have that flexibility. And that's something that, as I said, it just would not have been a possibility.
No, it wouldn't. It's totally changed the way of work. And that then creates more opportunity for people to create lives that that work for them. Because say, well, I've proven that I can do this. So I want to see that now more. And I think people have got a taste for it. And that's really exciting. And
even things like people who have side hustles, who, like, I'm seeing a lot of people in corporate and tech wanting to quit their full-time jobs and going into kind of doing their own side hustles and passion projects full-time, because with technology and with everything that it's giving us, it's allowing people to have more access to customers or to the same technology that big tech companies would have. And so you kind of, again, are seeing this shift of now is the time. If you're not happy with what you're doing, whether it is getting into an organization, there's so much out there. There's so much opportunity and work out there, or whether it's doing your own thing, that's a lot more accessible and easier than it ever has been as well, I think.
I agree, more so than ever. And so, yeah, I've actually seen the same. I've had a few clients who have left corporate roles recently and have taken a punt on either joining a smaller business or turning their side hustle into a full-time job, because when you were working from home, suddenly there was this realization of like, I don't need the corporate structure to do my job as much. And obviously, you know, for a lot of jobs, you need certain environments. But I think a lot of us kind of went, well, if I'm doing this day in, day out at home, you know, I've seen a lot of people in our industry go and set up on their own, because they're like, well, all I actually needed was the database. And I was doing it at home on my own in the pandemic anyway. And this is actually what it could look like. And I think there will be a shift to people. And I think there is a mentality of a new mentality of life's too short, that people are going, God, I need to embrace, because we just don't know what's around the corner, and I need to embrace what I actually want to do right now.
And there's an element of the last couple of years feeling trapped and particularly in this country where the borders have been closed and interstate borders have been closed, there's that feeling of stagnation and languishing is a word that I've seen used a lot in media when it comes to people working and kind of feeling like they're in a rut. And that feeling of feeling trapped is because we physically were. And it's the working from home. Your world became so small. Your interactions became so small. And there was so many benefits to it. But also I do sense a freedom and a zest for life and a need to want to make up for lost time, a sense of adventure. Mostly it's coming from me.
You are emanating. Sinead's emanating adventure.
Holidays.
Everything is about, But I think so many people will feel like that. Yeah. So many people will feel like that. And there is a whole new way of doing things that people, I mean, in our HumeScope business, which is the business that I run with Ez, our relationship manager, Lucy, she's working in Bali at the moment. Literally last week, she was like, I think I'm going to go to Bali for a couple of weeks. You guys okay with that? And we're like, sure. Like, you got your laptop, like you can do meetings, go for your life. Like, there isn't, but and that's the thing. We've broken a societal norm of like, well, no, you have to be in the office if you're working, you know?
That'll be me at the end of the month.
Yeah, it will be. And for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I now live in Bali. I don't know if you'd let me go live in Bali, would you?
No, we're laughing, but that fills me with fear. That's an actual no. That's not like a hell yes for you. Like that doesn't make me feel very good.
No, totally fair. And I don't want to spend all of the time and all of this podcast and all of the episodes speaking about the pandemic, but there was a seismic shift in how we live. What are your like key takeaways? Like what have you wanted to really hold on to that actually was a positive, that when it comes to work and living and the balance side that you do want to take through? Because there were so many learnings,
there
right?
There were so many. And the first lockdown was a real eye-opener for people. It's funny because I've been talking a lot about saying yes, but I think
Say no.
I think what the pandemic really gave me was super strong boundaries, because I realized, and I've always thought I've had quite good boundaries, but I actually didn't. And I used to say yes to so much stuff that I didn't want to do. And my weekends and my weeks would be dragging myself around to things that I had very little interest in doing, but I felt like I should be doing it. Well, not with you.
I'm joking.
You know what I mean? I was like, what? But yeah, and I think I suddenly realized like, I actually really like my own company.
Yep.
And I need to spend more time in my own company. So that was a bit in actually saying no. And I have such strong boundaries now. Like my morning routine, like you can't get hold of me before 9 a.m. in a work sense. Absolutely not. You know, Ez will often call me at 8:30 or something. I'm like, no, when are you gonna get it? No, like clients don't even try and pick up the phone to me until 9:30 because the first half hour of my day, like I don't start work until 9 now. And that's something that I know I need. And if I don't do that, the rest of my day, I really struggle with not having that strong morning routine. So I think what that time in lockdown did, it was actually allow me to start putting some boundaries in place of what I need to be able to maintain my energy, because my job is so draining. I spend all day. I mean, if I give you an example of today, I spent 4 hours straight this morning presenting. Like that's a huge drain of energy. And so if I don't spend time filling up my cup before that and after it, I can't do that day in, day out. And I think I was always running on empty, which makes me hate my business. And it makes me think it's the business's problem, whereas actually it's my problem in not distributing my energy effectively. And so I think the second lockdown was just a shit show and so boring. But that first lockdown we had in Sydney, I think gave me some real gifts.
And I do feel the same. I think that energy preservation piece it's so important. And particularly when we are in such extroverted industries and in extroverted jobs. And I know for me, the first 6 years of Lotus before the pandemic, it was similar to you. I had no boundaries. People would put things in my diary and I'd just go to them and it would all be in person. And I'm an introvert. I'm an extroverted introvert, but I'm an introvert. I do best when I'm recharging alone. I do best when I'm writing things. I do best in introverted settings. And so I look back on, and I used to get colds all the time. I used to get colds. I had immunity issues. I spoke to Erin about the fact that, and you obviously are fully across the fact that I've burnt out and kind of had that experience with chronic fatigue. And so all of this is like pointing to the fact that you're living out of alignment. You're living in a way that is absolutely unsustainable and against the core of your being and how you should work. And since, very similar to you, since the pandemic, there's better routines, there's better boundaries, there's better, I even spoke to a colleague this morning about the fact that I used to start work at like 7:30 just because it was get into the office, get on top of things. Whereas now I just start at 8:30. It's like,
and you adjust, right?
Yeah, and I haven't even thought about it. I'm just like, that's now what time I get to work.
Mine's getting later and later. I honestly reckon next year I'll be started going, don't call me before 10:30. I've got about 3 hours window in my day that I'll actually be able to do any work.
Perfect. You'll be what's Tim Ferriss and his 4-hour work week?
That'll be so efficient in those 3 hours a day.
I still need to clue into that because I can't quite figure out how anyone could do that many hours of work in a week. But no, that's it. And I think for people who are driven and type A and kind of ambitious and care about having a good work ethic and kind of doing a good job, it's hard for us to find the balance. We teeter between sort of, I can't say no to work and to opportunities and to stuff that's in front of me. But then also I'm tired and I only have so much energy, and it actually is finite, and I'm no use to anyone if I'm completely flogged all of the time. And I think even in this market, that's really hard because the opportunity is abundant.
There's so much opportunity.
So much.
I mean, you know me better than anyone. I still struggle with this stuff.
Oh yeah. You're never done.
Sometimes I'll call Sinead and be like, I've got to say no to something, and I'm basically having a panic attack over it. And then like, we'll go through this whole thing. I'll say no to the client and they just go, okay, no worries. Totally appreciate that. And I'm like, what? How was it? What? And that was what I was so upset about. So I think in exercising your boundaries, it then creates more positive reinforcement for you to do it in the future. But it's not easy. It's not easy to go, that doesn't serve me. No, thanks.
Not at all. And I think you touched on such a good point there about the fact that you do call me, because it's so important to have those people around you who you can say, these
help.
Are my best. Send help. But it reminds me of the fact that we sit down quarterly, and as part of your business, you do consulting and strategy with the leadership team at Lotus People. And essentially what that consists of is, here are all of the things I want to do over the next 3 months, and you telling me what I'm not allowed to do and what I'm allowed to, and me really pushing. And the podcast has been on that list for 2 years. And every quarter I get told, you don't have time for this. You don't have time for this. Last, was it January? I was like, can I do this? You have time now. You have enough people in place that you can do this. I'm like, yes, I'm doing it.
Yeah, it's me trying to hold Sinead back from breaking herself each quarter.
But you're doing a good job. I haven't broken in a while.
You're great. You haven't been sick in ages. But I think that is the thing. When you are a type A personality and you are go, it is about restraining yourself to be able to do a really good job on the stuff that you are doing.
Yeah. And it's hard because there's a discomfort in that. I think there's a stickiness in needing to, like, I like to schedule my downtime.
Yeah.
We're not those people, and many people who are driven aren't those people who can just chill and go with the flow. It's kind of what can I achieve in my downtime? What can I achieve in my year? What can I achieve in my quarter? And not necessarily saying that that's a good thing, but it's the way you're wired, right? But I think, having those people and that support structure around you is so crucial and so important to prevent burnout and to prioritize well-being and to make sure that it is sustainable. Because I see there being such a fine line, and I work with lots of founders, I work with lots of entrepreneurs and people who are so passionate about what they do, and it's amazing. But it's such a fine line between really applying yourself to that vision, like we did at the beginning of, not the beginning of Lotus. It's not like I don't apply myself and have no passion anymore, but that energy at the beginning and that one time at the beginning, we were excited. No, but that energy, like it's not sustainable. So you then have to figure out the structure, the people, the self-awareness, all of that stuff has to kind of come to the fore in order to enable you to keep working, because you can't be a successful person in business and have family and have all of these other things on the side unless you figure out how to do it sustainably.
Totally, because otherwise you end up resenting it. And often people don't lose their passion for what they do, they lose the passion for how they're working. Mm-hmm. And I think I've done that so many times. And I think now I'm to keep Hope's Consult alive in the way that it is and how much I love it is because of those boundaries, because now it fills up my cup rather than drains me. And I think that has been 4 years in the making and will continue to be, it will evolve, and in another 4 years, it will be a totally different version of itself again. And I think that's a very conscious journey you have to take.
Yeah, it is. You can't let life happen to you and just keep cracking on and just keep waking up every day and see where the day takes you. Like, there's an element of planning and focus and self-reflection and everything we've just spoken about that will enable you to continue to evolve within that. And I know that for me, like one of my core values is learning. Like, I'm such a nerd. I need to constantly, I am a bit of a nerd. Proud of being a nerd, but I have to have input and evolve and grow. And the only reason that I still am so engaged in what I do at Lotus is because over the last 7 years, I've had probably 50 different jobs. Yeah. Like the business keeps evolving, the business keeps changing. It was kind of going from strength to strength, and then COVID happened and knocked us from strength to weakness, because it was a very tough time for the industry. And then the bounce back has been so incredible. And then my job changes again, and then I've hired our incredible general manager Dave, and now my job has changed again. And so it's just the bigger the team gets and the more structure is in place, the more I get to kind of grow and change. And I think having that variety and that constant iteration is the thing that I know keeps me engaged. So when you can pinpoint, and anyone who is listening and anyone who is wondering about that, when you can pinpoint what that thing is, that core value, that core thing,
that's the thing.
That's when you know your engagement is going to be pretty high, because it will either be available in the place where you are, or you're going to have to carve the path and figure it out and find it yourself.
And for everyone, it's different. Like we've spoken a lot about the need for variety, but for some people, it's the need for stability. Yep. And I think it is. That's why it's such a unique journey, because it has to be what you value, and not, okay, you know, to be an entrepreneur, you have to absolutely value variety. You could be an entrepreneur and produce the same product day in, day out in exactly the same way, and you would make it work for you because that's what works for you. And so I think it, you know, whether it's working for someone else, whether it's just, it does come down to like, what do I fundamentally need in my life? What are the things that, you know, what are the patterns, the behaviors that I have gravitated towards? Those are the things that I need. And that's what I need to carve out in my career.
And it's funny you say that about kind of people wanting different things around. I met someone recently, and she was talking about the fact she was a nurse and she was kind of over nursing. And I was speaking to her about the fact that I run a business, and she said, oh God, I think I really want to be an entrepreneur, but these are my skill sets. And I was like, you don't want to be an entrepreneur. She's like, I wish I had a good business idea. And it's like, I think we're fed so much through the media and through what's happening right now with all of these startups and businesses IPOing and the huge, like the Canvas and the Airbnbs and all of these businesses, that people think that's what they want. And it's like, that it doesn't need to be sexy. It doesn't need to be that
I also
you work
know
for
I
these.
would hate that.
Oh my God.
It's so funny, because it's like, that's the idea. It's like, we've just had a good idea. We'd be millionaires. Like, my business is a good idea. I'm not a millionaire, but I love what I do. Yet, unless I can, you know, turn this into an app and then we're all winning. But like, I think we often think that, you know, being entrepreneurial is also the only path. It's not for a lot of people. Like my partner, he genuinely, that's his worst nightmare. How I live my life is his worst nightmare. He values stability. Like he likes having a structure, a framework. He will always suit working for someone else. But what he needs within that is a lot of freedom, creativity, because it's again about finding your values. So I think a lot of us wish we were entrepreneurs. And it's like, we associate it with creativity, but a lot of it is about commerciality and hard slog. And I'm not saying people don't realize that, but I think we have it as this sexy glamorized thing. And a lot of it is sitting at home in your pants, looking at your Xero account going, why the F is no one paying their invoices, and having to figure out BAS and, you know, downloading your receipts and
it sounds so glamorous, Laura.
And, you know, the only person you speak to all day is your bunny rabbit. You know, these are the realities of working for yourself.
Such a common issue for entrepreneurs. Like I just hear it all the time.
It's not for everyone, you know. A lot of people need more community around them.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a lot of people that can be out there on their own doing stuff as well. So it is about finding what you personally need.
And in all of the thousands of candidates we've met over the years, like some people love big corporates, like some people love working in those kind of giant organizations where there's so much kind of progression and opportunity to move. Some people are made for startups and that kind of absolute fast-paced, high energy, relatively young, dynamic sort of environment. Some people are so for purpose and love impact and social impact and should be in a nonprofit. Like it just varies so much. And I think the more prestige we put on the tech businesses and the entrepreneurial and all of that stuff, like it's not for everyone. No, and I don't think it needs to be.
Oh God, if I was going to work for another business now, it would be nonprofit. It would be for purpose.
A bunny rabbit sanctuary.
Oh my God, something heaven. If any animal welfare
Not
rescues
our
out
target
there
audience,
are listening to this, I do a mean recruitment role if you need anyone. But yeah, like the tech space wouldn't be where I would play. And so again, it's like not one size fits all, and we have to get out of that mindset. People have to. It's about really finding your own happiness journey, and that doesn't need to look like what's the trendiest thing right now.
And with all of that, a lot of what we're speaking about is kind of abstract. Here's the end goal. This is where you want to get to. For anyone listening who feels like they are in a rut, they don't know what the next move is. They're feeling that COVID fatigue of not the actual sickness, but the post-pandemic, wondering what's next. Like, is there any one piece of advice that you would say, look, just start here. Just this is the beginning point, and hopefully that will kind of put you on the path to figuring out how you can love what you do.
I would start at the end of every day, writing down just 3 things you really enjoyed about what you did that day and 3 things that you really struggled with. Like, it's and do that for a month, and then look back on it and notice what the patterns are. And I think that will help you start to shape, there are bits of my job I love, or I need to do more of those things, or the bits that I don't love, they're actually non-negotiable in this role. So maybe it's this role that isn't right for me, or maybe it's the industry. So I think it's, again, starting to cultivate some reflection exercises. And it doesn't need to be a big dramatic thing. Like, you don't need to quit your job, march out of there, go to India on retreat for months, it can be that. Absolutely. Like, you could eat, pray, love your way, like around Europe, and that could be your journey. But it also can be as simple as just going, that's really interesting. The last 7 days in a row, I've written down this. That really speaks to me. I'm going to research that a little bit more. And it can just be the smallest things that we give attention to. But I think it's about starting to listen. And I think a good way of doing that is writing things down, because then you have something to reflect on. So even just as a tiny step, that's a really nice way of just starting to recognize what works for you. I did that when, I wanted to make the move into management. I just started noting down every day what I really liked in the managers I saw around me and what I didn't. And those were the behaviors I started to emulate. So I think it's just starting to pay attention.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think that even as you said that, I don't think I had the conscious awareness of how it happened to me post-COVID or as COVID hit. But my job changed entirely. It was all introverted work from home. I was working on webinars with the team. We were creating conferences. It was all of this really introverted work. And I wouldn't have had time or space to even bring that into my day to day. And when everything changed, that was my kind of full-time job. And I loved, although I didn't enjoy the external circumstances and everything that was happening around me, I loved that aspect of it so much. And now that our world is mostly back to normal, they're the things that I'm pulling through. They're the things that I know in that time I was able to reflect and go, I'm weirdly enjoying this. I'm weirdly happy because I'm doing X, Y, Z. And so I think it's really good advice. And I think it's a really easy place to start. And I think it's the type of thing that if you start to put focus on it, you build traction around it, you will start to see a shift, even if it's just having that awareness in the first instance.
Just shining a light on it, isn't it? And it might be as simple as going to your manager, hey, I really love that project I worked on next year. When's the next opportunity for me to do something like that? And so again, it doesn't have to be these big seismic career shifts where you're like, I've upped, I've changed my whole life up, but it might just be like, I need more of that. I'm going to ask and see if they can give me more of that. And if they can't, then maybe I'll start seeing what else is available. But I think it's just these little steps of self-awareness.
Yeah. Amazing. That is a fantastic place to leave it. I think I could talk to you. We'll pick this up on.
We'll turn the mics off and then we'll just carry on.
But I so appreciate it. You honestly are the most inspiring, amazing human. And I am so grateful to you for coming on and chatting to us.
My pleasure, as always, back at you. I love these conversations. So anyone ever needs a chat on them, hit
us up.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.